So, welcome to each and everyone participating today. You're all part of a very significant moment with us as we launch the inaugural information webinar presented by the new federally funded Equity Assistance Center South at the Southern Education Foundation in Atlanta. I mentioned significant, and it's a significant moment, not only because of the launch, but also because we're hoping that this is a continued relationship with all of you on different levels. We're excited about today. So before I introduce the presenters, I would like you to make sure that you show those fantastic faces so that we can see you wherever possible. I know many of you are at your workplaces and it may be difficult, but if we can see you, we would love it. And if you could name yourself again, your states, your agencies, because we have representation from school districts, individual schools, the Department of Education, higher education, and other agencies. So we welcome all of you. Thank you. I am Donna Elam, Senior Advisor of EAC-South. With us today, we have a whole team of researchers and practitioners. We'll have the first speaker will be Tanya Gentry, who's the director of EAC-South. Our presenter, our researcher, director of the SEAC, which is the Student Engagement and Attendance Center, is Dr. Jarl Crocker. And with him is Taniko Reed, who is project manager at SEAC. We have senior study director, Carrie Murphy from Westat. We have Chelsea Sorensen, education project specialist from Westat, and our Stories from the South practitioners, administrators who are making the difference, representing all of us as they implement the research that impacts the work that you'll hear about today. You'll hear from Nashville, Tennessee, Warner Elementary School, and School District 5 of Lexington and Richland counties, Irmo High School International School for the Arts. And we will begin now. We're going to segue to our director, Tanya Gentry, director of the Equity Assistance Center South, and she'll share more about the center. Tanya?
Thank you, Donna, for that introduction. And before I give a very brief overview of the EAC-South, I would like to thank and acknowledge our program officers at the U.S. Department of Education, Brian Cohane and Rebecca Meyer. We appreciate your guidance as we navigate our way through our first year as a center. As many of you may know, the EAC-South is one of 4 federally funded regional centers across the nation, providing tailored support to address issues of equity. We cover Region 2, which includes Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, and DC. So needless to say, we're pretty busy these days. Our center's mission is to advise, assist, and serve our public education system by addressing issues of equity in the areas of race, national origin, sex, and religion to promote educational access and opportunity for all students. And with this mission in mind, our goals include a holistic focus on equity and supporting a broad range of stakeholders and their needs within our region, mitigating inequities, building broad partner networks, improving educational outcomes, and drawing on improvement science tools. Back to you, Donna.
You're on mute. You need to unmute.
That would help, wouldn't it? We have a fully packed hour. So with the Equity South at the Southern Education Foundation, and Tanya's already shared with you about serving public education systems addressing issues of equity in the areas of race, national origin, gender, and religion to promote educational access and opportunity for all students. And if we can move on to the next slide. This journey to excellence and equity is a collaborative one. And as you see, even in preparation for this work, it was a collaboration across many areas and content areas. But I think we can all agree as educators that we have to be intentional. We have to be intentional about identifying indicators. We have to be intentional about measurement. We have to be intentional about monitoring. And we have to be extremely intentional about supporting our educators and our students to be successful. The work that we're doing today and in this series, and a lot of the work that we do at EAC-South is based, all of it is based in research, but there's a consensus study report that was published in 2019 by the National Academy of Sciences and called Monitoring Educational Equity, which has 7 domains and 16 equity indicators. The entire series, starting today, the entire series is going to be addressing and crosswalking research to practice, so it becomes very operationalized for you as we learn together and as we hope that you implement many of these best practices throughout your systems and throughout the country. So this is a collaborative effort, and that's really, really important. And if you can go to the consensus study, and I believe, thank you, you'll see a lot of resources that we'll be offering. And if you look in the chat, you will see the overview of the National Academy of Science Equity Indicators highlights right in the chat. So you could start getting some of your resources immediately. And also you have the webinar series that EAC-South is presenting throughout the year. So we really want you to look out for it, register for all of the workshops that we'll be offering, and reach out to us as you need. So both of those links are in the chat, and thank you. And so for the last bullet for my part right now is that the EAC-South launching today this new series to support practitioners to address disparities in educational attainment. You know, we have lots of conversations on where do we start. This will help you and guide you from administrators, from policymakers, to practitioners, classroom teachers, to actually look at your entry point on how we are going to have successful schools for all of our students. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So for this first one is the domain kindergarten to 12th grades. Learning and engagement is the domain. And Dr. Joel Crocker will be sharing his research, his work with us on looking at disparities in student outcomes and the disparities in engagement in schooling, which are measured by attendance and academic engagement. If you go to the next slide for us. And Dr. Joel Crocker, I'm passing the torch to you.
Thanks so much, Donna. And thanks again to EAC-South for inviting the Student Engagement and Attendance Center to participate in this webinar. SEAC is also funded by the Department of Education to provide training and technical assistance to state education agencies and their school districts to help them address issues of chronic absenteeism and student engagement. I'm going to start by sharing a big picture overview of where we are with the rate of chronic absenteeism in our country. Then we'll look at the framework developed by Attendance Works, who serves as one of our subject matter experts that offers a strategic approach at the school and the district level to address chronic absenteeism. And then we'll turn to some concrete strategies that you can use at the school and the district level. If you want to take a look at the chat, I believe we dropped the link to the SEAC website, which is hosted by the Department of Education, where you can find additional resources that we'll also mention at the end of this webinar. So I want to start out by saying that it's important to acknowledge that chronic absenteeism is defined differently across the country. Sometimes it even differs from the school to the district level, even within the same state. But the most commonly used measure is that a student is chronically absent if they miss 10% or more of the days in a given school year. And that comes out to about 2 days a month, which may not seem like much, but the research underscores that chronic absenteeism is associated with negative outcomes such as lower levels of academic achievement, school dropouts, and other negative impacts. And I think one thing this definition underlines is the importance that every absence counts. As you can see, it includes excused absences, unexcused absences, and suspensions, all negatively affect a student's educational outcomes. Also, how we communicate about chronic absenteeism to school staff, students, and parents is especially important because we want to make sure that everybody is on the same page, that everyone understands the definition of chronic absenteeism, that it has negative consequences on academic performance, and that it's a key indicator to track from a student's home to the classroom to the district level. Next slide. What this graph shows is recent trends in chronic absenteeism. During the pandemic, there was a tendency to de-emphasize attendance as an indicator because it was simply more challenging to track when so many school districts were using remote or hybrid instruction. Unfortunately, what we've seen after a return to in-school learning is that the rate of absenteeism has continued to climb. As you can see, in the previous school year, which is the year we have the most recent data for, chronic absenteeism across the country is at 20.5%. What this means is that the issue is now a rising priority in school districts and states across the country, and is going to require close collaboration from the school level to the district level to the state level to address. What this graph also shows is the importance of data in addressing chronic absenteeism. For example, you can see that rates of chronic absenteeism are highest in elementary school and high school. Access to recent and accurate data is critical, especially disaggregated data that can tell you which types of students are chronically absent, which allows you to better tailor your responses to specific types of students. We'd like to pause for a moment and see how things are going in your school or district. So if we could go to the next slide. Please take a second to participate in the Mentimeter poll. You see the QR code up on the screen. You can use your smartphone to access that, and it will ask you whether the rate of chronic absenteeism in your school or district this year is increasing compared to last year, about the same compared to last year, decreasing compared to last year, or whether you're not familiar with those statistics. And for extra credit, if you know the current rate of chronic absenteeism and you'd like to share that, go ahead and put that in the chat so we can hear from the different schools and the different districts in attendance. Right, and it looks like our responses are coming in. Right, so it looks like for most folks, it's about the same as last year. So nationally, again, that was just about at that 20% level. We see for some folks, it's gotten a little bit worse. And the fewest responses are that it's decreasing, which again is in line with those national numbers that we saw. I'm going to give you a few more seconds to go ahead and enter your responses. Right, and again, as I said, that's in line with what we're seeing at the national level, that there has not been a decrease in chronic absenteeism, that actually those rates are either holding the same or increasing even after 2 years of return for most school districts to in-person learning. If we'll go to the next slide. Just so you know that all the news isn't bad, I want to highlight one state's effort to address chronic absenteeism. As you can see, Louisiana, like many other states, saw a significant increase in chronic absenteeism when students returned to school. However, they reduced their rate from 26.4% to 19.4% in the previous school year, due in part to a state initiative called Louisiana Comeback. This is an effort led by the Louisiana Department of Education to coordinate efforts to address attendance and improve academic recovery at the state level, and in turn provide more support at the district and school level. It specifically targets attendance and well-being, strengthening efforts for learning recovery and acceleration, and providing enhanced professional development for staff at all levels. The one lesson here is that efforts to address chronic absenteeism require collaboration across the board, whether at the state, district, or school level. And I'd encourage you all to make sure that you're aware of what's going on at all of those levels, to connect with resources that you have from your state education agency, from your district, because again, this is an issue that requires everyone to pull together. Next slide. I also want to stress the impact that chronic absenteeism has on issues of equity. Again, chronic absenteeism is deeply connected to educational inequity. The current high levels of absenteeism are a sign of educational inequities that have been further exacerbated during the pandemic. And again, school is a great equalizer for students, but chronic absenteeism can set back efforts to promote equity in educational achievement. Consider what we saw from recent releases of the NAEP scores, and there's a link in the slide, and you can also access that through the slide deck that'll be distributed after this webinar. Some kids weren't affected at all. Those were the kids who had reliable internet access, a quiet place to participate in online learning, their own device, and an adult to help them with homework, and ongoing access to a teacher. But this was far less likely for kids living in poverty and already struggling with inequities. And the kids with the least access to resources when schools are closed have the greatest challenges returning to school. So now they've not only missed out over the last 2 years, but they're continuing to miss school. Changing this dynamic requires us to be intentional and strategic, and it also underscores the importance of my earlier point about making sure that you're looking at the data that you have so you can see which students are being affected by chronic absenteeism so you can better tailor your responses. Next slide. So what can we do about this? Now I want to turn to a framework that's been developed by our colleagues at AttendanceWorks, which is one of the leading national organizations working to address chronic absenteeism. You can get more information on this framework and about other AttendanceWorks resources at their website, attendanceworks.org, and I'd encourage all of you to take a look if you're not familiar with the organization. Next slide. An important first step in addressing chronic absenteeism is making sure you understand its underlying causes. AttendanceWorks has identified 4 main types of issues that affect student attendance, and these are good places to start in your own reviews of the root causes of chronic absenteeism in your schools and districts. Now, barriers are things that serve to block attendance and can include a wide range of causes such as chronic illness, challenges with transportation, and family responsibilities such as caring for younger siblings. Aversions are factors that push students away from school, such as anxiety, academic struggles, or an unwelcoming school environment. Disengagement are drivers that decrease a student's feelings of connection and interest in school, such as the lack of culturally responsive instruction, the absence of meaningful relationships with school staff, and a lack of enrichment opportunities. Finally, misconceptions are incorrect beliefs about chronic absenteeism, such as absences aren't a problem if they're excused, that missing 2 days a month won't affect learning, and that suspensions don't count as absences. The bottom line is that addressing chronic absenteeism starts with understanding its root causes. If we can go to the next slide, let's take a quick review of the audience. And if you could access the Mentimeter again with your smartphone, and in one word, share one root cause of chronic absenteeism that you've seen in your school or district. Again, just one word, and we'll see what the word cloud says. Illness, and that is one of the most common causes of chronic absenteeism, especially students with chronic health conditions. Mental health, that's another one. There's a growing trend to provide mental health days for students, which is actually a great help for longer term attendance. Illness, sickness, disengagement. So we see many of those barriers mentioned in that previous slide.
Yeah, and Joel was starting to see motivation as well. Disengagement. Scared. So many of our families were impacted. Transportation, bullying.
And Donna, I think what this underscores, like we've been saying, is the varied causes of chronic absenteeism. This is definitely not something that can be simply reduced to 2 or 3 root causes. And that's why it's so important to be able to really know your school population, know what kinds of challenges your students are having good data across your student population so you know which types of students are being most affected by chronic absenteeism and the issues associated with it.
And Joel, in the chat, we're seeing relocation and homelessness as well.
Another huge issue. So students who have unstable housing situations are at high risk for chronic absenteeism, just to mention one particular group. Let's give folks another couple of seconds.
And notice that Dr. Crocker mentioned potential root cause. It's so important for us to seek the root causes for when we see disparities so that we can address it and mitigate for it.
Thanks, Donna. So why don't we talk in a little bit more detail about that framework I mentioned that can help schools and districts address chronic absenteeism. So what we need is an all hands on deck approach to put in place the positive conditions for learning. These 4 positive conditions that you see up on the screen are the flip side of the factors we just discussed that cause chronic absenteeism. We know that students are more likely to attend regularly when school is physically and emotionally healthy and safe, when it creates a sense of belonging, connection, and support, when it offers academic challenge and engagement, and when it's made up of staff and students who have the well-being and emotional competence to build the relationships that are at the core of these positive conditions for learning. Chronic absence occurs when challenges in the community or in the school erode these positive conditions. So what else can schools and districts do about this? Next slide. In order to provide equitable access to education, schools and districts need to put in place a tiered system of support for students and families. Now, almost all schools and districts at this point have a multi-tiered system of supports in place, but not all of them have fully incorporated chronic absenteeism into each tier. As I mentioned earlier, data about attendance is a crucial tool to help address chronic absenteeism. This graphic shows one example of how to use attendance data to inform a multi-tiered system of support to improve attendance at the school level. Starting at Tier 1, this represents universal strategies to encourage good attendance for all students, and we'll provide examples of strategies in each of these tiers in just a few minutes. Tier 2 provides early intervention for students who are missing between 10 to 19% of school days and need more support to avoid chronic absence. Tier 3 offers intensive interventions for students who are absent over 20% of the time and therefore face the greatest challenges to getting to school. At the bottom of the pyramid, you can see those foundational supports. These sit on top or right below the 3 tiers of intervention, and these foundational supports are the factors that we saw in the last slide that promote positive conditions for learning. Please feel free to drop in the chat any promising practices from your school or district about how you use your MTSS to address chronic absenteeism. But again, one thing you can do back in your school or district is take a look at your MTSS and see how it integrates attendance data and chronic absenteeism into its intervention strategies across those 3 tiers. Moving on to the next slide, we'll look at what you can do at the district level. This graphic shows an example of what an ideal systemic approach looks like when it's applied at the district level. It has 6 key ingredients, which include, starting at the top right, capacity building, which are things like training and resources. Next are actionable data, like disaggregated attendance numbers that let a district and its schools compare absenteeism rates across different groups of students. Next are positive engagement, which are ways to connect with learners in their communities, such as opportunities for parents and students to provide input on policies about attendance. Next are strategic partnerships, which means your ability to connect with other groups and organizations to leverage support from organizations like service providers and community-based organizations to provide additional programming and help. Equitable resources means that support gets targeted to groups of students who need it most. And finally, shared accountability means that everyone from the district to the school level takes responsibility for working together to improve attendance. Next slide. Now we'll turn to strategies that you can use to address chronic absenteeism and give a few examples of additional resources that you can use along the 3 different tiers that we just discussed. But before we do that, we want to see what types of strategies you use in your schools and districts to address chronic absenteeism. So one more time, if you'll access that Mentimeter and just drop in the responses, again, just a short description. These will come up as you type them in. So again, be brief, but let us know what you're doing in your school or your district, promising practices, strategies you've tried that you know have had a positive effect to address chronic absenteeism.
And as they're getting ready to enter, Jarl, it's really fabulous how quickly our tech support, Emily Overdorf, is assisting us. So thank you so much. We have 2 answers so far. Oh, this is great. So, Jarl, it starts with disaggregating data to target interventions.
Music to my ears. And I like the idea of an attendance party.
Attendance campaigns. Mailing letters to parents and guardians after the students hit 10% absences.
And I think they're reading our mind. I think we're going to talk about at least a couple of these strategies. And many of these are great examples of tier 1 interventions. I saw someone in the chat, Merrick, mentioned home visits. And I think that's usually more of a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention, but a great example and one that we know has had proven success.
And I love the Check and Connect program.
Yes, again, another evidence-based program we know has produced results to improve attendance.
And I'm seeing connections with families. We'll be hearing about that from some of our stories of the South as well.
All right, let's wait for 1 or 2 more to come in.
Student-led rallies and personal contact. Okay, I see that in the chat, Jarl.
Yeah, great examples, folks. So feel free to continue to put those examples in the chat as we go through a couple of the strategies that we can use. But I think these are all excellent ideas. And it also shows the power of peer learning to see what's going on in other schools and districts to see what's working for them.
Yeah, that weekly motivation and class competition, we have to collaborate and make it a systemic support for all of our students and our families. And I see that you are already doing those kinds of activities. So thank you.
All right, thanks so much, everyone who responded. And again, feel free to keep putting those examples, those promising practices in the chat. Now we want to turn to concrete strategies that you can use. Starting out with tier 1 strategies, and these are the ones that make up the majority of the most commonly used interventions and are aimed at encouraging better attendance for all students to address absenteeism before it affects achievement. Setting expectations and recognizing improvement are essential. Strategies we'll cover are explained in more detail in the resources we'll provide at the end of the webinar, and those slides will provide you with links to guides, toolkits, and similar supports, in addition to the websites that we've already mentioned. So starting out, one of the things you can do are those unobtrusive reminders of the total numbers of days missed to parents. So these can be included as part of regular communications, such as report cards or at parent-teacher conferences. Next, they're email, text, or postcard mailers. And these can also be used as reminders, ways to let parents know how many days of school students have missed, but those are also excellent ways to communicate policies about attendance and explain why attendance is important to parents and students. Parent ambassadors and parent phone trees are also great ways to directly engage parents. And I think we had a number of other examples that were mentioned in all the great promising practices that you entered in through the Mentimeter. So again, these are just some of the concrete ways that you can reach out directly to parents, to students, to reinforce the importance of attendance. Now I'm going to turn it over to Taniko Reed, our project manager for SEAC, to talk about some additional strategies. Taniko, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Jarl. I appreciate it. Yeah, so to reiterate, Tier 1 strategies are those universal strategies, school-wide efforts that help support better attendance for larger groups of students. So in addition to nudging, which Darrell just talked about, these other strategies targeted at English learners support significant student populations across the board. First, strong partnerships with families are key to sustaining student attendance during remote and hybrid learning. By reviewing attendance policies with these English learning families, schools can better work together to collaboratively build trust and engagement. On the administrative level, leaders from numerous departments such as accountability, instruction, and technology can also work together in order to develop practices and create systems that promote consistent attendance for all students. And finally, by becoming familiar with and understanding the cultural traditions of your English learning families within the larger school community, you can enhance your ability to create a welcoming and respectful school environment by allowing for better scheduling, offering learning opportunities, and improving communications with families across the board. For a Tier 2 intervention, these are the more intensive and generally more expensive things that you can do to target students at greater risk of chronic absenteeism, such as those who are close to or already missing 10% of the school year. These students and families need personal attention in order to understand the importance of attendance and create plans to address those barriers. So as you can see on the slide, youth engagement programs are initiatives designed in order to promote students as learners and build specific character skills for those students. For an example of some of those resources, feel free to consult the Youth and Family Engagement Tools, which was a resource developed by the SEF. And finally, for our Tier 3 resources, these are the things that involve using intensive support in order to provide for the students who are missing the most school across the board. Typically, that means engaging multiple agencies at the same time in order to give students what they need. So I remember in the chat earlier, Marek and Tizai identified relocation and homelessness as root causes for chronic absenteeism. Tier 3 strategies like interagency case management help address those issues. For example, community and supports use coordinators in order to connect with housing supports, social services, and other community supports in order to build a general solution in order to help specific students who are really facing stronger attendance. All right, and I think with that, we're going to hand it back to Dr. Alam in order to talk about some of those stories from the South.
Thank you, Taniko. And the stories from the South. Now, how are our administrators operationalizing these practices? We'll hear from two systems, one from Nashville, Tennessee. We'll see a video on one of their promising practices, and followed by another LEA from the South Carolina. So we'll start first with Nashville, Tennessee.
The Warner Exchange came about through months of listening to families, hearing this connection between students missing school and lacking these basic need necessities. We said, what if it was an exchange, right? You send your child to school every day where they receive a world-class education, and we provide you with these basic needs.
All of our students in our whole school, every day that they come to school, they earn 5 Warner Bucks. And those Warner Bucks get tallied, families can come, they can shop. So our idea is to say, families, let's support you, but we're gonna support you and not just give you a handout.
The earning part is the most great part, you know, so to be able to give back to it's like I'm giving something to be able to get something. It was a struggle for me, but I was already changing around to make sure that they got here every day. But this was a great help. This was a great help.
I love that we're recognizing that our families are doing the very best they can. And we're saying we see you.
And we want this to be a partnership. We're in this with you. And together, like, your children can be successful.
I really do appreciate the staff and just the community itself, even the people that helps make the donations that makes it happen, you know, for it. So yeah, I really do. It's a great thing. It really is.
We need the community's support to continue to stock our shelves. And this is the way that not only our families, but also our scholars have the ability to understand that there's people that may not come into the school building that are cheering for them. There are people that may not see them every day that are praying for them. They're supporting them. They're sending them love, sending them good energy, because ultimately, this isn't a Warner initiative. This is a community initiative.
Powerful, wasn't it? Yes, and in the chat, I see that you love the video with the parent response, because this is a collective effort when we impact all of our students. Thank you, Dr. Gibbs, the principal of Warner Elementary, attendance all stars, and Dr. Regina Etter, the district coordinator director for magnet schools. By the way, Warner happens to be a federally funded magnet school, one in the country. So as we gear up for our second story, are there any questions? I'm hearing, I love the cool mural. Oh, in the Exchange building, place for families to shop and pick up groceries. Any other comments that you'd like to make on that? Yeah, it's powerful. Every time I look at that video, it reminds us of why we do what we do as educators. It's a partnership. Dr. Etter, thank you for joining us, and thank you for preparing to present in this webinar. Dr. Regina Etter, the district you're the district coordinator. Can you unmute for just a moment?
I'm the project director.
Project director for
Yes.
the magnet schools in Nashville, Tennessee.
Quick comments now, just letting you know that what we have worked at Warner, we have worked extremely hard to reduce the chronic absenteeism. As we looked at numbers, Dr. Gibbs and I we talked about what could be done. And actually it was going to one of the MSA conferences that he saw the idea, one of the persons on the team. We heard about what they were doing in some other schools and started looking at conservatories as an additional way in which to reduce the chronic absenteeism there. So doing the research, looking at his data, Dr. Gibbs and his team, awesome, incredible team, determined the need for making it happen on Mondays. That was the day where chronic absenteeism showed up the most. Kids just could not wake up after a great weekend at home. So what they would do is, so he decided to use conservatories. So they're in the related arts. So being an arts theme magnet, they included strings, they included dancing, they included tap, they included more art. They had about 5 different conservatories. And what they did with that, they talked about how they could get the students into writing more, looking at in their ELA, the students were not able to convey their thoughts as well. So that was an area within their achievement. They really wanted to work on one of the standards. So the students had to write, rewrite, have it proof. All of that went into stating why I want to be in this conservatory. And then once they had completed that for the younger students, parents helped with that, teachers helped, and everybody supported. They came, we had to read through all of those. And then once that happened, the students it was announced which conservatory you actually would be up in a part of, and you were allowed to attend. And we would clap after everybody's name. Oh, it was just absolutely amazing. And then the numbers dropped again, as we've heard today, how they will slip back down because you have to keep it recharged and be innovative. So Dr. Gibbs looks at the exchange. And thusly, you've heard everything today in this webinar, and to see the parents, they only had a couple of persons that they talked to, but hearing parents saying, hey, I'm encouraged It's a buy-in for the family. We all are a part of it, of this. So I'm getting my student up because I can go to the exchange and pick up some of the essential things that I need for my family. So now here's little Regina at home saying, well, I'm gonna go because she's feeling a part of contributing to the family. So there we are, building that community within the home. It is absolutely amazing. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we've tried to replicate this model in another one of our schools or something very similar to it. But having good partners, and as Donna alluded to earlier, being funded, we learn how to make it happen. Yes, we get funds, but we also have to get out there with our partners and get them to buy in and give them the why in behind what we do. And ultimately, when you impact the family, you get the why in of it, the buy-in is there. Parents will come out, and I will say this school has been celebrated. It is now a reward school, no longer off a priority. Parents that come in the community, they were the school that people walked by and said, oh, that's a school? But look at them now with having support, having the resources to do what they need to do. And now the community is saying, hey, we want to be there. We're doing this. And this is one of our historical schools. It is absolutely phenomenal. The work that can be done with a little ingenuity, a little innovation, and support from persons like Dr. Donna and Long.
Thank you so much, Regina. And thank you for sharing some of your best practices with us. And in the chat, the why in, that resonated with many of our participants. The why in is a great way to frame this. So thank you so much, Dr. Etter. We're going to move on to our next district, who's going to share some of their stories. Again, thanks, Dr. Gibbs, for us again and your team. So that was from Nashville, Tennessee. And now we are going to hear from Jessica Marzi, who is the vice principal over triage and attendance at Irmo High School in Lexington, Richland County School District 5. And remember when we opened up, Jessica, as you begin, the intentionality, we talked about if we're going to make a difference in impacting disparities, we have to be intentional. And even your title, assistant principal over triage and attendance. So we're passing the torch to you, Jessica.
Thank you, guys. Wow, that Warner, man, that was very powerful. It's hard to follow that up. I am Jessica Mars, and I'm one of 5 assistant principals here at Irmo High School in Columbia, South Carolina. I do have a lot of duties, but my main duties are being over attendance and over student focus, which was we formerly called triage. I wanted to change it from triage, right? Because we're not stitching people up here. So we call it student focus now. Just to give you a little context, Irmo High School is a suburban school, is what we like to call it, with approximately 1,300 students in grades 9 through 12. We are an arts magnet, a school-wide arts magnet. We offer other magnet programs within the school. We also have a fairly transient population. We have 20 plus apartment complexes that feed into our cluster. And I think that is important. Early on, we discovered that many of our families required extra support in order to see their students to see success in school. If you're in high school or you have a high school age student or you know anyone in high school, you know that you have to be very creative when it comes to really everything to keep the buy-in, but especially attendance, especially in the spring. So one thing that we started to do over the summer was to get in the community. We got into our neighborhoods. Last year, we connected with several of our apartment complexes that feed into our school, and we took our computers and our Wi-Fi, whatever connectors, so that we had Wi-Fi, and we did registration in the neighborhoods. So we also took popsicles. That didn't work so well in Columbia, South Carolina. They melted so quickly. So this year we're going to do something a little bit different. But we had the connections we made with our families on such a positive note. We were able to get the majority of our families in those neighborhoods registered. Their brothers and sisters got registered who don't go to Irmo High School, but they, just being there to get them starting on a positive note, right? I'm here to support you. That made such an impact. And it provided us an opportunity to really tell about Irmo and what we had to offer. And so that's like the pre-work. And I think that's really important going into the process that I'm about to tell you about. When you look at, sorry, we had a fire drill and I'm at school. When you look at my slide, can you share my slide? Yeah, the slide.
Go to the next slide.
There you go.
Perfect.
Sorry. Thank you. What happens for us with academics, attendance, and behavior, really, with that student focus process, our administrative team and our school counselors, they work very closely together throughout the school year. So the school year begins and we're broken up into caseloads by students' last name. So I'm over A through E and I have about 330 students and I work with 2 counselors. And we use our Power School data, our teacher observations, parent input, everything we can pull to identify students who may need additional support. And this is really where our roundabout, if you look at the slide, begins. When I was creating this, I was like, what should this look like? And it really is a continuous cycle. So our counselors and our administrators meet bi-weekly, but we pre-schedule our meetings. So they're a priority. So it's protected time. So it doesn't get pushed to the side. As assistant principals, we are so busy. And so are counselors, right? And everything, testing, everything gets in, but this is protected time. So it's already on the calendar. Teachers also receive a Google form 48 hours prior to us meeting with those identified students. And it's very short. You know, teachers don't want to get a whole bunch of stuff. It's very quick. It's like, are they attending? What is keeping them from being successful? You know, give me your thoughts, so that when we're there, it's a more holistic view of the student. When we meet, our student aides that we have each block runs the passes to our students. So we stay in one place, the students come to us. We kind of go through the why of them coming in. The first time is like, why'd you call me? Am I in trouble? No, you're not in trouble. We just want to talk, you know? And then we go through this document that we created as a team. It's called What's the Problem? And it really gets us thinking, what's the root of the problem? Why is this student not being successful? And it's a series of questions. Once we get to the root of the problem, the most important part of that conversation is, what do we do after we find the root of the problem, right? We've been meeting and doing this for a long time. The big shift in our student focus was, what are the next steps and how do we hold each other accountable and the student accountable for going through the intervention, right? If it's a check-in, check-out for attendance, then who is your check-in person? And how are we getting that information? What are you checking in about, right? So that's on there, the next steps. And then the last piece of that is we log all of this in Power School. So if something were to happen, the next person doing it, they could log in and say, no, they met on him. This is what's going on. This is where we are. Also, the parent gets a piece. And this was a big aha moment for us when the parent got a piece of that we met on their student and what we talked about, right? So that's the communication. After we meet and we've logged it all in, they get to see, I met on your student today. Hey, I talked about this. It's not a bad thing. But if you have some questions, call me or reach back out. I have parents reaching out to me constantly now. So that really helped increase our parental involvement. And then we monitor. If students are making adequate progress, the wheel continues. And as they improve, we pull back support. If at our next bi-weekly meeting, we see that they're not making progress, then we kind of stop. And that's where you see that, what do we do with roadblocks? We did this, nothing's changing. We also have one monthly, we call it large student focus. It's where every support in the school meets for 1 hour. Now, we're very intentional about the students that we bring to this student focus. So it's not a bunch of students. It's a select few. It's the students that we have met on at least twice. We have data to show that what we've done for intervention and it hasn't worked. And then the people who are involved in that student focus are all of our school counselors, all of our administrators, our school nurse, all of our mental health counselor, our clinical counselors, our special education placement chair, and our school psychologist. And typically when we do that, it's about 2 or 3 students that we have. And we just put our heads together and we say, okay, guys, this is what we've done. Where are we going to go? All right. I heard them talking about home visits. We do home visits all the time, right? Our attendance clerk pulls data every day to tell me who I need to go see, who have I not seen. And then I think the last piece of it is, determining what is success. And that is something, a success story for us is that not all students have the typical 4-year high school diploma, I was successful. But it doesn't mean they weren't successful, right? If we get them that high school diploma another way, maybe we go through the adult ed route, maybe they got behind in middle school, so meeting them where they are. We have had 3 that I can think of that went to adult ed and needed like 4 credits. But it was attendance that was keeping them back. I need to support you better where you are. You work a job, you're supporting your family. That's important too, right? So let me see who I can reach out to get that started. That is pretty much Irmo High School in a nutshell for student focus.
Jessica, thank you for sharing all of the work that you're doing there at Irmo High School in Lexington, Richland School District 5. So any questions for Jessica or for Regina? I see a lot of chats of thanking you for sharing your insight, your best practices. Great. And Jarl, if you were to respond to that, what we have consistently heard from the 2 schools is about relationships, about communication, about partnering with families. What is your take on it?
Thanks, Donna. And one of the things that we see in the literature on chronic absenteeism and various studies is that the level of student engagement and family engagement in the school is strongly correlated with better attendance. So those folks who have been mentioning strategies and the importance of building those relationships, creating welcoming environments for all students, all families, I think are really, hitting some of the most important factors in making sure that we build school environments with positive conditions for learning, like we were talking about earlier, and really laying the foundation for those strong relationships that are so critical to keeping students in school, but not just keeping them in school, but making sure they're engaged fully while they're there.
I wanted to look at some of the comments in chat. And one of the comments is that one thing that was noticed with both of the stories from the field were that both schools created a framework. You heard them talking about data. You heard them talking about a collective effort, and you heard them talk about a framework. So you can see that they're based in best practices. They're using their data to inform their practice. We have a question. What was the biggest challenge in getting the student focus process in place? And Ms. Richardson, would that be for either district? If you can unmute.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
for either. Okay, so Regina Etter or Jessica Marzi? What was the biggest challenge in getting the student focused process in place?
The biggest challenge for us at Irmo was determining what all needed to be discussed. We've been doing this for a while, and Dr. Long, that we've had a triage process, and we've kind of revamped it each year. For a long time, I felt like we were meeting about meeting, like we had all these problems, but we were never really talking about interventions, right? It was like, well, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on. And we met, and then we would run out of time. And it was like, oh, wait, what are our next steps? And I think going into it with a strict agenda to say, we're going to identify what the problems are. figuring out to send the teachers a Google form. How simple is that? These teachers are with them all the time, right? Like, what? We should probably collaborate with them. So we did, the simple things, reaching out to parents. We couldn't get parents to respond. Well, are we providing the right form of communication to the right people?
Great, Jessica.
Yeah.
And only because we have 2 more minutes and we have 1 more Mentimeter where we want to see where the takeaways from all of this rich information from you, from South Carolina and from Tennessee and from Dr. Crocker and today, and also to Nico. We would like to go to the next slide. Thank you so much for the administrators that shared their stories with us. Keep putting your comments in the chat. The evaluation, we want to make sure, Chelsea, thank you for reminding me of that. Please complete the evaluation before you leave today.
Donna, I'm going to recommend, just to be respectful of folks' time, that we just kind of wrap up with, I know Jarl wanted to just kind of mention a few things about the resources, and I think we got a lot of the key takeaways in the chat, which is so wonderful. So we'll skip through that final Mentimeter, and Jarl, if you want to talk through any of your resources.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks so much, Carrie. And Donna, just a few resources to mention. SEAC has an attendance reflection tool designed for school districts. It's meant to be a self-facilitated tool to help you review your attendance policies, your practices, your use of data, many of the things that we've talked about today. I'd also like to recommend the CAFE model used by states like Nebraska and Connecticut. There's great information in the link on the slide. You use Zoom meetings, usually on a monthly basis, to reach directly out to parents, community organizations, again, to build those relationships, strengthen your connections to the broader community. And finally, I can't recommend highly enough the attendance playbook. That's where we pulled many of those examples of strategies from. So if you haven't taken a look at the attendance playbook, it's a great resource, many great concrete ideas, many of which are evidence-based. So with that, Donna, Carrie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And in the chat, thank you, Jarl. In the chat, you can register for our next webinar, which will be on how to improve educator recruitment and retention. You have a feedback survey. We want to begin. Remember, we started with, this is a significant moment for us and for all of us together. We'd like to stay in touch, and please look out for all of our webinars. Go on our website. We would love to hear from you and see all the resources that we'll be sharing with you. Again, thank you. Dr. Gentry, the director of the EAC-South, is looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you, Dr. Crocker, for collaborating and presenting such rich information with Tanico and the team. Thank you. In the chat, thank you so much. And there's the EAC.southern.education.org, the email at southern.education.org.